From Maid to Millionaire's Love. How a black virgin melted the CEO's cold heart. The cab rolled through the iron gates of Hillcrest Mansion, its tires crunching the gravel of a driveway that seemed to stretch forever. Rain kissed the windows as Aaliyah Brown stared out, her heart thumping against her ribs. This wasn't just any job. This was her chance to build a life for her grandmother, to start over, to finally breathe. She smoothed the edges of her grey thrift store coat, fingers brushing the leather strap of her old duffel bag, the only luggage she carried. At 22, Aaliyah had known more struggle than most people twice her age. Life had taken her mother early and left her to care for the one person who loved her without condition, Grandma Ethel. This job at Hillcrest promised room, board, and enough income to pay for Grandma's medication and maybe, just maybe, help Aaliyah afford nursing school someday. But stepping into the mansion felt like entering another planet. Marble floors gleamed like mirrors beneath her scuffed sneakers. The air smelled of polished oak, expensive cologne, and something colder, like frost laced in gold. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline, while chandeliers glittered with unspoken wealth. She walked slowly, careful not to let her awe show too much. Behind her, the butler, a tall man with a stiff posture and a stiffer expression, cleared his throat. "This way, Miss Brown." Miss Brown. The title sounded foreign, coming from someone so crisp, so distant. She gave a polite nod and followed. Every corner of the mansion was silent, eerily so, like a cathedral frozen in time. No laughter, no music, not even the sound of television or casual conversation. Just footsteps and emptiness. They reached a grand double door. "This is Mr. Kensington's study. He'll meet you here." Her heart skipped. She'd seen his photo online. Liam Kensington, CEO of Kensington Enterprises, a billionaire before 30, an empire built on ruthlessness and risk. The press called him cold, sharp, and untouchable. His piercing blue eyes were as famous as his reputation for firing employees without blinking. Aaliyah wasn't easily shaken, but she whispered a prayer under her breath. "God, don't let me mess this up." The door opened. He stood by the fireplace, tall and impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit. His medium-long hair was pushed back from a chiseled face that could have belonged to a Greek statue. But what struck her most wasn't his beauty. It was the chill in his eyes. Those eyes scanned her like a spreadsheet, calculating, not a flicker of warmth. "You're the new maid." His voice was deep, smooth, and completely indifferent. "Yes, sir, Aaliyah Brown." She kept her tone respectful, not weak. He said nothing for a moment, just watched her, assessed her. Then, with a flick of his hand, he turned away. "You'll report to Mrs. Lynn, the head housekeeper. Your room is on the 3rd floor. I don't like noise, I don't tolerate laziness, and I don't engage in small talk." Aaliyah nodded. "Understood." He finally looked at her again. Really looked. "Your hair." She stiffened. "Sir, it's intricate." Her fingers unconsciously touched her thick braids. "Thank you." That was the end of it. He turned back to his desk, already typing something on his laptop. She waited a beat longer, then excused herself. The butler led her away, but the weight of Liam Kensington's gaze lingered long after she left the room. Her new quarters were small but warm, tucked near the attic with a slanted ceiling and a view of the garden. Aaliyah unpacked in silence. One pair of sneakers, 2 uniforms, her Bible, and a photo of Grandma Ethel, her entire world in a single bag. She sank onto the bed, letting the silence settle. Below her, the mansion buzzed with quiet opulence. She didn't belong here. Not yet. But she would earn her place. That night, she walked past Liam's office while dusting the hallway. The door was slightly ajar. He was on a call, voice clipped. "Number, I don't care if the board is nervous. I built this company without their help. Either they get on board, or they get out of the way." She froze. The cold edge in his voice was real. No fake press image, no media exaggeration. He was ruthless. Yet, something in the way he stood by the window, fingers resting on the glass, made him look oddly lonely. Days passed. Aaliyah worked hard, scrubbing, folding, polishing. She never complained, even when her knees ached or when the chef muttered that her cleaning wasn't fast enough. She sang softly while dusting, little melodies her grandmother taught her. One morning, she didn't realize Liam had entered the room until his voice cut through the quiet. "What song is that?" She spun, startled. "Oh, just something from home." "It's old. Yes, it helps me think." His eyes softened for a moment. Just a flicker. "My mother used to hum something like that." Before she could respond, he walked away. No goodbye, no further questions. That night, Aaliyah stood by the balcony outside her room. The city lights twinkled in the distance, but her heart felt heavy. Why had he hired her personally? He barely noticed her. Was she just a convenience, or did he see something she didn't? The mansion was vast, filled with everything money could buy: gold, crystal, art. But not love, not joy. Liam lived in a palace, but it was a cold one. And for reasons she couldn't explain, Aaliyah found herself wondering what kind of pain built walls that high. The next morning, she found a new coat waiting in her closet. It was warm, soft, and clearly expensive. There was no note. Just a label. Kensington Tailors. Her heart raced. He had noticed, and slowly, quietly, something began to shift. The morning air inside Hillcrest Mansion was as still and sharp as glass. Outside, the sky hung grey over the manicured hedges, and inside, silence reigned like a rule. Aaliyah adjusted the strap of her apron and quietly stepped into the CEO's private office, feather duster in hand. It was her first assignment alone in his workspace, Liam Kensington's inner sanctuary, where assistants barely dared to breathe and phones only rang once before being answered. The office smelled of leather and old paper, of power cloaked in quiet elegance. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, filled with rare volumes Aaliyah doubted he ever had time to read. His mahogany desk sat like a throne in the middle of the room, polished to perfection, with silver pens aligned as if measured. She'd barely started dusting when the air shifted. Footsteps, sharp, purposeful. She turned, heart jumping into her throat. There he was, Liam, dressed in a charcoal vest over a white button-down, sleeves rolled to his elbows. His presence was magnetic and unsettling. His medium-long, golden-brown hair was neatly brushed back, and those infamous piercing blue eyes flicked toward her without expression. "You're in early." His tone wasn't warm. It wasn't even cold. It was nothing. Like she was invisible. "Yes, sir. Mrs. Lynn asked me to begin here." He gave a curt nod and strode past her, dropping a sleek laptop onto the desk with a thud. His fingers danced over the keys as he sat. Not a word, not a glance. Aaliyah felt the heat of embarrassment crawl up her neck. He hadn't remembered her name. Or perhaps he simply didn't care to. "It's just a job," she reminded herself, dusting the edge of a shelf. "He's your employer, not your friend." Still, his silent presence made her hands clumsier than usual. A crystal globe wobbled beneath her duster, and she gasped, steadying it just in time. Liam didn't even look up. She let out a quiet breath and moved to the far side of the office. There, alone and hidden behind the bookshelves, she allowed herself to hum. A soft, nostalgic tune. It was a lullaby from her childhood, one her grandmother sang when the lights went out, when the world felt too loud. The sound helped her center herself, reminded her of love and safety. But just as she reached the second verse, his voice sliced through the air. "Where did you learn that?" She turned sharply, eyes wide. Liam was staring at her, this time really staring. His fingers paused on the keyboard, and there was something almost haunted in his gaze. I don't know. It's something my grandma used to sing," she replied quietly, surprised by the question. He stood slowly, walked around the desk. His expression was unreadable. "My mother used to hum that every morning, before everything changed." Aaliyah's breath caught. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" He raised a hand, not in anger, in memory. "She had a voice like yours, software, always humming while she folded laundry. She died when I was 15. Cancer." For a moment, the wall around him cracked. His voice wasn't ice anymore. It was hollow, weary. "I didn't think I'd hear that song again." Aaliyah didn't know what to say. His eyes weren't just blue. They were stormy, filled with something far more fragile than power. Pain. She saw it there, lurking beneath the surface, like a wound never allowed to heal. "I'm sorry," she whispered again, and this time her voice trembled with sincerity. He studied her for a beat longer. Then, just like that, the wall went up again. "It's fine. Continue your work." She bowed her head and turned away, but her hands shook slightly. Behind her, he walked back to the desk, but his typing had slowed. His mind had wandered elsewhere. For the rest of the day, the encounter replayed in her mind. The change in his tone, the sudden softness. That name, his mother, hovered like a ghost over the office. Later that evening, in the staff kitchen, Aaliyah quietly asked Mrs. Lin about Liam's mother. The older woman, who had been with the household for over 20 years, nodded sadly. He was very close to her. She was the only person who could reach him. After her death, he stopped smiling. His father raised him with fists, not words. Aaliyah's heart ached. The coldness wasn't just arrogance, it was armor, a survival mechanism forged by loss and silence. The next morning, she entered the office again. Liam was already there, reading a financial report. She kept quiet, moving to the corner to begin her duties. But just as she reached for the duster, she noticed a small change. On his desk sat a new object, a silver-framed photo. A woman with soft eyes and a kind smile. She was humming in the picture, as if caught mid-note. "My mother," he said suddenly. Aaliyah turned. "She's beautiful." She was. She used to say music could heal everything, even people like me. She smiled softly. "I believe that, too." Something unreadable flickered across his face. Not a smile, but not a frown either. The interaction was brief, but it mattered. In a world of numbers and bottom lines, of sterile glass towers and hollow meetings, Aaliyah's voice was the first thing in years that made Liam feel something. Not success, not fear, not ambition, but something warm, something real. He would never admit it, but the black virgin maid he barely acknowledged had just chipped a corner off his icy heart. It was long past midnight when the mansion fell into a hush, so deep it nearly swallowed the sound of Aaliyah's muffled sobs. The grand halls of Hillcrest slept under velvet shadows, moonlight slicing through tall windows, turning marble floors into silver rivers. The mansion, always so polished and perfect by day, now felt too large, too empty, too indifferent, like it didn't care who hurt inside it. And on this night, Aaliyah Brown, quiet, kind Aaliyah, couldn't hold her tears anymore. She sat alone at the kitchen table, arms folded over a stack of crumpled bills and a trembling phone. A voicemail still echoed in her ears, Grandma Ethel's weak voice, rasping from a hospital bed hundreds of miles away. "I'm okay, baby. Just a little tired. Don't worry about me, you hear?" But Aaliyah knew. The medicine wasn't working anymore. The clinic wanted payment up front, and the meager pay she saved after buying the barest necessities wasn't enough. It had never been enough. She clutched her phone to her chest and let the tears fall freely. The kind that only escaped when no one was watching, when no one was supposed to care. But someone was watching. Hidden in the hallway beyond the kitchen door, Liam Kensington stood frozen in the shadows, silent as a ghost. He hadn't meant to walk in. He rarely came down from his study at night, but he'd left an important file in the kitchen office drawer and decided to retrieve it himself. What he didn't expect, what shook him, was the sight of his maid, the black virgin with the quiet strength, breaking apart in the dark. Her shoulders trembled. Her thick braids framed a face that tried to stay brave, but couldn't. And when she whispered, "I'm sorry, Grandma. I'm trying so hard," something in Liam's chest cracked. He didn't move. Couldn't. He watched her wipe her eyes with the sleeve of her faded sweater and gather her papers with trembling fingers. The dignity she clung to, even in despair, humbled him more than any boardroom opponent ever had. Later that night, long after she had returned to her room, Liam sat alone in his home office, the same song she once hummed playing faintly in the background. His hands hovered over the keyboard as he accessed the household staff files. Aaliyah Brown, age 22. Emergency contact, Ethel Brown. Relationship, grandmother. He stared at the screen for a long moment. Then, with a few swift keystrokes, he transferred $25,000 into her account. No note, no message, no explanation. Just a silent gesture. Untraceable, unspoken, undeniable. The next morning, Aaliyah blinked in disbelief at her phone screen. Her bank account balance had grown overnight, grown in a way that didn't make sense. "No," she whispered, staring in disbelief. "This can't be right." She checked again, refreshed the app. Her hands trembled. Her heart pounded wildly. It had to be a mistake. But there was no error message, no glitch, just a number, a miracle, staring back at her like it had fallen from the sky. She rushed to Mrs. Lynn, but the housekeeper knew nothing. The agency hadn't given bonuses. The system hadn't changed. And yet, someone had given her hope in the form of numbers that could save her grandmother's life. All day, Aaliyah moved like a woman with a secret. She worked quietly, but her heart was lighter, her footsteps softer. Her eyes sparkled even when she dusted, and the song she hummed carried more joy than sorrow. But something else stirred within her, a feeling that she wasn't as invisible as she thought. That afternoon, while dusting the library, she caught Liam watching her from the study doorway. Their eyes locked for just a moment. He looked away first. She tilted her head. There was a softness there, quickly hidden, but real. He didn't speak, but he lingered longer than he usually would. She could sense it, a shift in the air between them. Later, she passed him in the hallway, and he offered a quiet, "Miss Brown?" No title, no dismissive coldness, just her name. And for the first time, Aaliyah looked up and replied, "Mr. Kensington," with a warmth that made his steps falter. That evening, after the mansion dimmed into shadows again, Aaliyah stood on her tiny balcony, breathing in the chill of night air. She looked up at the stars and whispered, "Thank you, whoever you are." She didn't know for sure, but deep down, her heart whispered the truth. It was him, the cold, untouchable CEO with the piercing blue eyes, the man who barely spoke, who ruled an empire without mercy. He had seen her, and he had cared. Liam sat in his dark study, staring into the fire. His fingers tapped against the whiskey glass in his hand, untouched. He hadn't expected her gratitude to feel like a punch to the chest, but it did. Because when she smiled that morning, so grateful, so radiant, he realized something that terrified him. He wanted to see her smile again, not because of pity, but because he needed to know that something in this cold-carved world could still be soft, still be warm. And somehow, she was that warmth. The mansion still stood the same. The chandeliers still gleamed. The silence still ruled. But between the cracks of cold marble and diamond chandeliers, something had begun to grow. Something that started with tears in the dark and ended with a silent act of kindness from a man who didn't believe in kindness at all. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Hillcrest Mansion, painting golden streaks across the marble floors. Aaliyah had just finished arranging fresh flowers in the drawing room when her name echoed through the hallway in a tone she never expected. "Miss Brown." She turned, startled. Liam stood there, tall, immaculately dressed in a custom navy suit that clung to his broad frame like a second skin. His blue eyes weren't cold today. They weren't guarded. They looked conflicted. "Sir?" she asked softly, unsure why his presence suddenly made the room feel smaller. "I need a favor," he said, then paused, seemingly choosing his words carefully. "There's a golf championship event this weekend. It's high profile, press investors, celebrities. Normally I wouldn't care, but my ex-fiancée will be there, and she thrives on headlines." Aaliyah blinked, unsure where this was going. "Okay, I need someone with me. Someone grounded, not looking for attention, not trying to stir more rumors. And you want me?" she asked, eyes wide, her heart skipping. His gaze didn't waver. "Yes." For a full beat, silence stretched between them like a string pulled tight. "But I'm just your maid." Liam's jaw tensed. "You're more than that." Her breath caught. She wasn't sure if he meant it, or if the words slipped out unfiltered. But they settled in her chest like warm rain. "I don't have anything to wear to something like that." "I'll handle it," he replied smoothly. "My stylist will come by tonight, if you're willing." Still stunned, Aaliyah nodded slowly. Okay." The next day was a blur of fittings, shoes, makeup consultations, and a stylist who seemed almost giddy at the chance to transform Aaliyah. "You're naturally beautiful," she said with a smile. "We're just going to bring it out." When she emerged that evening in a sleek black satin gown, every eye in the room froze. Her braids were elegantly pinned into a soft updo, a few stylish curls framing her glowing face. The dress clung gently to her curves, modest yet magnetic. She looked like she had stepped from a dream, elegance wrapped in quiet power. Liam, who was waiting in the foyer, turned at the sound of her soft footsteps, and for the first time, he truly saw her. Not as a maid, not as a charity case, not as a background presence, but as a woman, a vision, a mystery. "You look His voice trailed off as his eyes travelled from her neckline to the way the fabric shimmered as she moved. "I wasn't sure I could pull it off," she said, cheeks warm. "You didn't just pull it off," he murmured. "You stole the room." The car ride to the golf championship estate was quiet at first, but the silence wasn't awkward. It was filled with a new awareness. His gaze flickered to her every few minutes. She noticed the way his hand rested on the gear shift, how his jaw flexed when he was deep in thought. "You don't have to talk to anyone you don't want to," he finally said. "If anyone gives you trouble, I'll shut it down." She smiled gently. "I'm not afraid." He looked at her for a long moment and nodded. "Didn't think you were." The championship event was nothing short of opulent. A sea of designer suits and glittering gowns flooded the estate grounds. Golf carts rolled by like royal chariots, and champagne glasses sparkled under the afternoon sun. As they stepped out of the car together, cameras turned like sunflowers to the light. Flashes, whispers, shocked gasps. Liam Kensington had brought a woman, a new woman. And she was stunning. His arm slipped around her waist, without a word, his touch firm but respectful. She stiffened for just a second before letting herself lean into his side. "I can feel them staring," she whispered. "Let them," he said calmly, his voice laced with quiet pride. They made their rounds, board members, sponsors, old money heirs and heiresses. Liam introduced her as Miss Brown, his voice steady, without shame or hesitation. Many of the guests wore plastic smiles and tight eyes. Others looked intrigued. One woman, tall, blonde, and icy, approached with a champagne glass and a smirk. "Well, Liam, you've certainly changed your taste." Aaliyah opened her mouth, but Liam beat her to it. "Yes," he said coolly. "I've decided to upgrade from shallow to genuine." The woman's face stiffened. How charming. He didn't even look at her again. They found a quiet spot by the viewing deck, overlooking the green. Aaliyah sighed in relief, taking in the fresh breeze. "I wasn't sure if I could breathe in that crowd," she admitted. "You handled them better than most professionals," he replied, a hint of admiration in his tone. She looked at him then. Really looked. "Why me, Liam?" He didn't answer right away. "Because you're not trying to impress anyone. Because when I'm around you, I don't feel like a performance." She blinked. "I thought you liked performances." He met her eyes. "I did, until I realized how exhausting they are." As the sun dipped low, casting a golden hue over the course, music began to play softly from the estate speakers. Aaliyah turned her head as Liam extended a hand. She stared at it, uncertain. "I don't dance. Neither do I." They smiled at each other, and then they danced. Slow, simple, close. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. The air between them felt electric, soft, alive. He leaned in, just enough for his breath to graze her cheek. "Thank you for saying yes." She looked up at him, her heart racing. "Thank you for asking me." That night, as they rode home in silence, Aaliyah watched his reflection in the window. She no longer saw the cold CEO who barely spoke. She saw a man unraveling slowly, piece by piece. And as Liam glanced at her from the driver's seat, the edges of his mouth lifting slightly, not a smirk, but a real smile, he realized something terrifying. The black virgin maid with the kind eyes had become the only person who could quiet his chaos. The drive home from the championship was quiet, not from discomfort, but from something deeper, an unspoken connection crackling gently between them. The kind of silence that said more than words ever could. The kind that made Aaliyah's heart beat in rhythms she didn't understand. By the time they reached Hillcrest Mansion, the moon had risen high, casting silver light across the vast estate. The staff had gone to bed, and the mansion had returned to its usual hush. But Liam didn't head straight for his wing. Instead, he turned to Aaliyah as they stepped through the grand foyer. "Would you join me on the terrace?" His voice was lower than usual, almost hesitant. Aaliyah's breath caught in her throat. "Sure." She followed him through winding halls until they reached the private rooftop terrace that overlooked the city below. The view was breathtaking. Skyscrapers glowing in the distance like a galaxy on Earth, while the real stars glittered above them in quiet majesty. A gentle breeze tugged at Aaliyah's soft shawl, and she pulled it tighter around her shoulders. Liam noticed and wordlessly slipped off his tailored jacket, draping it over her shoulders with careful hands. "Thanks," she murmured. He nodded and moved beside her to the railing. The silence stretched again, warm this time. "Safe. I used to come up here as a boy," he said suddenly, his voice distant, before the world got louder. Aaliyah looked over at him, surprised. What changed? He exhaled slowly. "My father." The words came out like a stone dropped into still water. Aaliyah didn't press. She just waited, patient and still, offering the gift of listening. He was powerful, respected, ruthless, everything I thought a man should be. He taught me that feelings were a weakness, that showing vulnerability meant giving people ammunition. Liam stared out at the horizon, his eyes reflecting the moonlight like ice catching fire. He used to say, "A Kensington doesn't cry. He conquers." Even when my mother died, he didn't shed a single tear. Just shook my hand at the funeral like it was a business deal. Aaliyah's heart ached. She stepped a little closer, her shoulder gently brushing his. "I never mourned her properly," he continued, "because I thought grief made me unworthy of his name. I buried everything, even the music she used to play. That tune you hummed that day. It was the first time I remembered her in years, without guilt." Her hand reached out, slowly, resting on the cool stone between them. "You were just a child," she said softly. "You deserved to feel, to be held." No one had ever said that to him before. He turned to face her then, and in the quiet of the night, with only the stars as witness, his mask slipped, just a little. Just enough. "I don't know how to be soft," he admitted. "Not with people. Not with—" He stopped. "Not with someone like me?" she asked gently. "Not with bitterness, but with curiosity. With someone who makes me feel safe," he corrected, his voice raw. Her eyes widened, lips parting slightly. "Liam." He reached up, hand trembling slightly, and brushed a loose braid from her face. His fingers grazed her cheek, warm or reverent, unsure. The moment between them swelled like a wave rising, inevitable, powerful, and tender. He leaned in, inches from her lips. His breath mingled with hers, and her heart thundered against her ribs like a drum of anticipation. But then he froze. His gaze searched hers as if begging for permission, as if terrified of ruining something sacred. Then, slowly, painfully, he pulled back. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Aaliyah blinked, stunned by the sudden distance. "Why?" "Because if I kiss you now, it won't be enough, and I don't want to take more than you're ready to give." The words hit her harder than a kiss ever could, because it wasn't rejection. It was respect. She stood there, unsure of what to say, heart pounding, body still humming from the closeness. Liam stepped back, giving her space, but his eyes never left her. "Good night, Aaliyah," he said gently, the way her name curled in his mouth like a vow. "Good night, Liam," she replied, her voice shaky, but full of something new. Something blooming. That night, Aaliyah lay awake in her room, staring at the ceiling, replaying every second on that terrace. The stars had heard more than confessions. They had witnessed the beginning of something deeper than desire, a spark of trust, a breath of hope. In the room above her, Liam sat alone on his bed, shirt unbuttoned, hands clenched into fists. He had almost kissed her. He had wanted to. But for once, he wasn't chasing pleasure or control. He was falling for the first time in his life. And it scared him more than any deal he'd ever negotiated. The days that followed their moment under the stars were filled with silence, but not the comforting kind they had once shared. It was heavier now, thick with tension, questions and feelings neither of them dared name. Aaliyah threw herself into her work, trying to keep busy. Scrubbing marble counters that didn't need scrubbing, fluffing pillows that were already perfect, anything to distract herself from the way her heart leapt every time she heard footsteps that might be his. Every time she passed his door, her pulse quickened with hope and dropped just as fast when it remained closed. Liam, meanwhile, watched from the shadows. He kept himself barricaded in meetings, immersed in numbers and deadlines. But her face haunted him. The softness of her voice. The warmth in her eyes when she told him he deserved to feel. The way her lips had parted under the moonlight, so close, so trusting. And how he'd walked away. But it was her strength, her purity, her untouched heart, that black virgin soul of light that terrified him more than any emotion ever had. It was late afternoon when Liam found himself wandering outside. He had barely noticed where his feet were taking him until he stepped into the garden. It was quiet there, peaceful. And that's when he saw her. Aaliyah was curled up beneath the old cherry blossom tree, its petals drifting lazily in the warm breeze. Her head rested against the wooden bench, a worn book cradled against her chest. The sun filtered through the pink blossoms, casting dappled light across her caramel-brown skin, making her look ethereal, like a dream too good to be touched. She was asleep, peacefully, softly, the kind of sleep only someone with a pure heart could manage. And something inside Liam cracked wide open. He walked toward her slowly, unable to look away. His chest tightened, his throat dry. Her braids had loosened slightly, and one had fallen across her cheek. She stirred just a little, her lips parting, as if she were whispering secrets in her sleep. And that was the moment he lost himself. He knelt beside her, heart hammering wildly, and reached out with trembling fingers to brush the braid from her cheek. Her skin was warm beneath his touch. Her eyes fluttered open. For 1 second, just one, neither of them breathed. Then, without another thought, without words or logic or fear, Liam leaned in and kissed her. It was gentle at first, a hesitant brush of lips, but then she kissed him back, and the world disappeared. Suddenly it wasn't soft anymore. It was fire, raw and consuming. Her fingers curled into his shirt. His hand cradled the back of her neck. Mouths moved in a rhythm that was desperate, tender, and filled with everything they had been holding back. There were no titles, no mansion, no CEO, and no Maid. Just him and her. Just Liam And Aaliyah, a black virgin with a soul of grace, and the ruthless billionaire whose world was falling apart and rebuilding itself because of her. Their kiss deepened, hungry and sweet. The garden spun around them. Somewhere, petals rained down like blessings. Time bent itself to their moment. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. Liam pulled back, breathless, his eyes wide with something that looked far too much like fear. Aaliyah opened her mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. He stood abruptly, took 2 steps back, shook his head like he was waking from a spell. "I shouldn't have," he whispered. "Liam." But he was already turning, already retreating. "I'm sorry." And just like that, he was gone. The next few days were unbearable. He avoided her entirely. He left for work earlier than usual, came home late, gave instructions to the head butler instead of speaking directly to her. She caught glimpses of him sometimes, on the phone in the hallway, behind tinted windows of his town car, walking briskly through the lobby. But he wouldn't look at her. He wouldn't speak to her. He had kissed her like she was air and flame and home, and then vanished into his own walls. Aaliyah sat in her room, staring out at the same garden where everything had changed. Her lips still tingled from his kiss. Her body still remembered the way he held her, like she was fragile and precious and his. But now she felt hollow. She had given him her trust. She had let him in. And just when she thought they had reached something real, something that mattered, he had run. But worse than his silence was her aching belief that he hadn't run because he didn't care. He ran because he did. Because loving someone like her, someone black, someone humble, someone untouched, was dangerous in his world. Because to truly choose her meant becoming someone new. And maybe, just maybe, he wasn't ready. Meanwhile, Liam paced in his office, gripping the edge of his desk until his knuckles turned white. He replayed the kiss 1,000 times. Her eyes, her mouth, the way she had responded with such unguarded honesty. He had never felt anything like it. And that terrified him more than anything. He wasn't good at soft. He didn't deserve pure. He wasn't worthy of a woman like Aaliyah Brown. He told himself this like a mantra, like a wall, like a lie. But deep down, under the guilt and fear, a question kept whispering louder. What if she's the only real thing you've ever known? Aaliyah woke that morning with a strange warmth in her chest, like sunlight blooming beneath her ribs. Despite the silence between them since the kiss, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. That kiss had meant something. It had to. The fire in it, the tenderness. It wasn't the kind of thing that happened between strangers or by mistake. She had caught him watching her once, just yesterday, from the library window. His eyes soft, unreadable, like he wanted to come closer, but didn't know how. Like he was a man standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure whether to fall or fly. She had smiled at him. He hadn't smiled back, but he hadn't looked away either. That was enough for her. For now, she dusted the grand chandelier in the dining room with a lighter heart, humming again, always humming. Her voice carried through the mansion's silence like honey through tea, unnoticed by most, but not by him, not anymore. Later that afternoon, she walked into the garden to fetch a book she'd left behind, and that's when she heard it. 2 voices. One unmistakably sharp and smug. The other a man's low rumble, vague and indifferent. Aaliyah froze behind the hedges as the words floated out, careless daggers in the warm spring air. "She's cute, I'll give you that," the woman said with a snort. "But really, Liam, a maid, A black virgin, Maid. How poetic of you." Aaliyah's blood turned to ice. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. "You seriously brought her to the championship just to shut me and the tabloids up?" The woman, clearly his ex, Savannah, laughed. "Well played. The media ate that rags-to-riches narrative right up." "I didn't ask you here to talk about her," Liam said tightly. But he didn't deny it. He didn't defend her. He didn't say anything. Aaliyah didn't wait for more. She turned and walked away. No, ran through the garden, her heart splintering in her chest with every step. Back inside, she burst into her room, slammed the door, and collapsed onto the bed. Her breath came in broken gasps, tears spilling faster than she could stop them. Her body trembled as her mind spun with every word she'd just heard. A black virgin maid, used, manipulated, just a narrative. Everything, every shared moment, every vulnerable look, every breathless kiss, it had all been for show. No, her heart whispered. Not him. He's not like that. But what kind of man lets someone speak of you like that and says nothing? What kind of man kisses you like you matter, then stands silently while another woman mocks your existence? She couldn't stay. She wouldn't. Not when her dignity had just been ripped apart and left bleeding under a cherry blossom tree. Liam was in his office when she stormed in, her tear-streaked face and trembling hands stopping his world cold. "Aaliyah! You used me," she choked, voice breaking. "Tell me I'm wrong. Please, tell me I'm wrong." He stood, words caught in his throat. He had so much to say. How it wasn't like that. How Savannah didn't understand. How he didn't even understand until it was too late. But his fear clamped his mouth shut. Fear of saying the wrong thing. Fear of looking weak. Fear of needing her more than he'd ever needed anyone. So he said nothing. Not a word. And that silence? It screamed. Aaliyah laughed bitterly, wiping her cheek with the back of her hand. "That's what I thought." She turned and walked out. And still, he said nothing. She packed fast, her hands shaking, as she folded her few clothes, the small savings he had secretly given her, once now burning in the back of her mind, like poison. She looked around the guest room, her room, for one last time. The space where she had discovered freedom, joy, even love, and then lost it all. She left the uniform on the bed. No note, no goodbye, only silence. Hours later, Liam stood in the center of her empty room, the scent of her lingering faintly in the air, lavender and honey. His eyes swept across the folded uniform, the stripped bed, the quiet. She was gone. She was gone, and he had let her walk away without a fight. In the days that followed, the mansion felt colder than ever. The walls echoed more loudly, and the silence was no longer peaceful. It was punishing. Her absence was a wound. Her laughter no longer drifted through the halls, her hums, her kindness, her fire. They had vanished, leaving only hollow luxury behind. Liam couldn't focus, couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. He walked past the terrace where they had shared their first near kiss and felt a dagger twist in his gut. He sat in the garden and touched the bench where they had kissed and nearly crumbled. Because it wasn't just a kiss. It was the first moment he had ever felt alive, and he had destroyed it. His assistant, his staff, even his ex sensed the shift in him. He barked fewer orders, held longer silences, looked out the window too long. Something in him had cracked, and everyone could feel it. But only he knew why. Only he knew what he'd lost. Not just a maid, not just a moment of passion. He had lost Aaliyah. The black virgin with the quiet strength, the storm-soft smile, and the heart that had dared to believe in him. And he had let his fear swallow her whole. The days that followed Aaliyah's departure passed like ghosts, quiet, invisible, and cold. Liam Kensington, once the picture of unshakable control, became a man haunted by what he couldn't undo. The mansion lost its warmth. The sunlight that used to pour through the tall windows now felt pale, sterile, hollow. The once beautiful garden, once a refuge of blooming peace, looked overgrown and unkempt. He never stepped into it again. He threw himself into work like a man possessed, back-to-back meetings, international calls, aggressive expansions. On paper, the Kensington empire was thriving. But behind the sharp suits and boardroom victories, Liam was crumbling. He barely spoke unless necessary. His voice lost its edge. His eyes, once fierce and calculating, held a quiet sorrow. His staff noticed the difference. The butler, the chef, even the groundskeepers exchanged silent glances. The mansion's walls whispered with the name they never dared speak aloud, Aaliyah. Meanwhile, across town in a far humbler building, Aaliyah was rediscovering her strength. She had taken a job at a women's shelter, a small underfunded place filled with laughter, pain, and survival. The kind of place where broken hearts and battered souls stitched themselves together with hope. Here, no one cared what kind of shoes you wore or who you once kissed under the stars. Here, the truth mattered more than pretense. And here, Aaliyah was needed. She cooked meals for women who hadn't eaten in days. She read stories to children who clung to her like lifelines. She listened to the silence of those who couldn't yet speak and held their hands anyway. But even as she gave so much of herself, she carried a hollow ache deep in her chest. At night, when the shelter quieted and the city fell into shadows, she would lie awake and remember him. His eyes, blue like winter skies. His voice, rough yet soft when he let it be. His kiss, fiery, stolen, unforgettable. She would press her fingers to her lips and feel him still. Weeks passed, then a month. She told herself she was healing, that walking away had been brave, that she was finally standing on her own. And yet, every time her phone buzzed, a tiny flame of hope flared inside her. But it was never him. Liam stared at her contact number more times than he could count. He hovered his thumb over it during late nights in his office. He typed messages and deleted them. He rehearsed apologies in his mind. But every time he came close to reaching out, he remembered the look in her eyes that day. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the disbelief. And he couldn't bring himself to reopen that wound unless he had something real to offer. Not just an apology, but change. He went back to the garden one night. The bench where he had first kissed her was now covered in petals and dust. He sat there for hours, replaying every moment between them, her laughter, her pain, her strength. He missed her hums, her questions, her heart. He missed the girl who had brought warmth into a cold house and turned a powerful man into a human one. And in that stillness, he realized something. It wasn't enough to miss her. He had to deserve her. Back at the shelter, Aaliyah smiled through the pain. She wore strength like armor, but her eyes often betrayed her. One of the younger girls, maybe 15, tugged at her sleeve one day. "Why are you always sad behind your smile?" she asked gently. Aaliyah paused. The question hit her harder than she expected. She crouched down, brushing the girl's hair aside. "Because sometimes," she whispered, "you give your heart to someone, And they don't know how to hold it. The girl nodded, wise beyond her years. Then maybe they need to learn. Liam began therapy. It shocked even him. He sat on a leather couch in a high-rise office, arms crossed, voice low. But over time, he talked about his father, his mother's death, the fear of weakness, the fear of love, the fear of losing control. And slowly, painfully, he started to face the walls he had built, the ones that had kept him rich, powerful, and alone. He spoke Aaliyah's name for the first time to someone else. The therapist looked at him and asked, "Do you love her?" Liam's throat tightened. He didn't say yes. He didn't need to. Weeks turned into almost 2 months. Aaliyah found herself walking by Hillcrest more often than she admitted. She never went close, but sometimes she stopped across the street, looking at the gates from afar. It looked the same. Cold, grand, empty. She turned away every time. And yet, on the other side of those walls, Liam stood at the window, watching, waiting, praying. There was no contact, no phone calls, no texts, no letters, only the silence between them. A silence filled with the memory of a kiss, a silence that hurt more than any spoken word ever could, a silence that only love could break. Liam Kensington sat behind his glass desk, fingers steepled, eyes narrowed at the glossy tabloid headline on his screen. CEO's Cinderella vanishes after rumored romance fallout. Aaliyah's photo, taken at the championship, was plastered beneath the title. Her soft smile, her glowing brown skin, the elegance of her simple black dress. It all cut through him like glass. He hadn't seen her in nearly 2 months, not since the day she walked out with tears in her eyes and betrayal in her voice. Not since he'd let her go without so much as a single word to stop her. But today, everything would change. It started with an anonymous tip, an email flagged by his assistant early that morning. Subject: Savannah isn't who she pretends to be. Attached were encrypted files. Liam's legal team verified their authenticity within hours. What they revealed made his blood run cold. Savannah, his ex, the woman who had mocked Aaliyah in the garden, the woman whose lies had shattered the fragile trust between him and the only woman he'd ever truly cared for. Savannah had been feeding confidential information to one of his biggest corporate rivals for nearly a year. Emails, photos, meeting transcripts. And the kicker? Her presence at the golf championship, her cruel jabs to Aaliyah, the entire setup. It had all been part of a calculated smear campaign, designed to rattle Liam, to distract him, to ruin his reputation and destabilize his empire from the inside. She hadn't just hurt Aaliyah. She had orchestrated it. Liam's rage was cold, controlled, razor-sharp. He arranged a private meeting at a luxury penthouse Savannah frequented downtown. When she walked in, heels clicking, perfume trailing, smug as ever, he didn't even rise from the leather chair. "Well, this is a surprise," she purred, pouring herself a drink. "Have you come to your senses? Realized maids don't make good mistresses after all?" Liam's eyes didn't waver. "Sit down." Something in his voice chilled her smirk. "I know everything," he said. She blinked. "What are you talking about?" "You, the leaks, the fake rumors, the manipulation, the partnership with Kingsley and Company." He stood now, slow and deliberate. "You didn't just destroy my relationship. You tried to destroy me." Her mask cracked. "You can't prove—" "I can, and I will. My legal team is already moving forward." The glass in her hand trembled. Liam took a step closer. "You didn't just cross a line, Savannah. You lit it on fire and danced in the ashes." "Liam, please. Save it." His voice was ice. "You will never come near me, my business, or my personal life again. Ever." Savannah's face crumpled. "You're ending everything over her. A maid?" "No," he said, jaw clenched. "I'm ending everything because you are the biggest mistake I ever made." He turned and walked out without another word. The door slammed behind him like a final verdict, but the taste of justice was bitter. Because it was too late. He had cut ties, exposed the truth, and burned the last bridge to a poisonous past. But the one person who mattered, she was already gone. That night, Liam sat alone in the garden, Aaliyah's garden. The bench where they had shared their first kiss now bore dust and petals. He ran a hand over the worn wood. He should have defended her. He should have believed in her. Instead, he'd let another woman's poison cloud his judgment. He whispered her name into the night. "Aaliyah." It felt like a prayer, a confession, a plea. But the stars gave no answer. Across the city, Aaliyah stirred in her sleep. A strange ache curled in her chest. She sat up in bed, glancing at her phone. No messages, as always. Still, something felt different. In the air. In her bones. Like the truth was finally clawing its way out of the dark. Liam began to visit the shelter. Not openly. He donated anonymously at first, paying for upgrades, new supplies, food, bedding. Then one day he walked in. He didn't see her, but she had been there. He saw her handwriting on the whiteboard, her name on the volunteer roster, and his heart swelled and sank all at once. He left a letter. No assistant, no lawyer, just him, folded by hand, written in ink. It said only this: "I was blind, and it cost me everything. You were never a pawn. You were my peace, my light, my truth. Please let me prove that I still carry you in my soul. Liam." Aaliyah found it 2 days later. She read it once, then again, then held it to her chest and cried. The rain fell like a symphony of sorrow, steady and unrelenting, painting the streets in silver reflections. It was the kind of night meant for quiet tears and second chances. And for Liam Kensington, it was the night he'd lay down his pride. For her. He stood in front of the brick-faced building of Hope Haven Shelter, completely drenched, his navy coat clinging to him like regret. His golden brown hair, usually immaculate, hung over his forehead in soaked strands. The once pristine CEO looked like a man stripped bare of power, left only with emotion and desperation. People passed him on the sidewalk, umbrellas shielding their curiosity. But Liam didn't move. He just stared at the doors. Inside, Aaliyah was mopping the floor near the back, lost in her routine, headphones in, trying not to think about him, but failing. He was always there, in every kind act, every heartbeat she tried to quiet. And even now, she felt something different in the air, like a change was coming. It was Jamal, one of the teen volunteers who burst into the room breathless. "Miss Aaliyah, you need to come to the front, now." "What happened?" she asked, heart racing. It's him," Jamal said. "He's outside, in the rain, and he's not leaving." By the time Aaliyah reached the entrance, a small crowd had gathered. Volunteers, staff, even a few curious passers-by peeked in through the glass. There he stood. Liam. A man who once commanded boardrooms and reporters now stood humbled, holding nothing but a folded piece of paper and a bouquet of white lilies, flowers of purity and peace. When she stepped outside, the crowd fell quiet, retreating slightly to give them space. The shelter's front awning barely shielded her from the rain, but she didn't care. Not now. Their eyes locked, He stepped forward, breath fogging in the cold. "I don't deserve this moment," Liam began, voice trembling. "I know that." She didn't reply. He took a deep breath, his hands visibly shaking. "I came here to say something I should have said the day you walked out of Hillcrest Mansion. Something I should have shouted the moment I saw the pain in your eyes." The shelter doors opened wider behind her as people leaned in to listen. Whispers filled the hallway. Aaliyah stood frozen, caught between caution and a heart that still ached for him. "I was a coward," he continued, his voice hoarse but rising. "I let fear control me. I let my ego speak louder than my heart. And I hurt you. Someone who gave me nothing but kindness, trust, and love." Raindrops rolled down his face, mixing with the tears he didn't bother hiding anymore. "I didn't use you. I didn't play you. I fell for you, Aaliyah. Hard. And that terrified me, because I didn't know how to handle something real." Someone in the shelter whispered, "Is this really happening?" Liam glanced at the paper in his hand, then crumpled it. "I wrote a speech," he said. "But screw the speech. You deserve more than rehearsed words." He took a step closer. "You deserve me, raw and broken, and trying like hell to be better. You taught me how to feel again, how to see again. And I'm here in front of everyone. Not as Liam Kensington, the CEO, but as Liam, the man who is utterly, foolishly, completely in love with you." Gasps rose from the crowd. Even Aaliyah's legs felt weak beneath her. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he added gently. "I'm begging for a chance. One chance to show you that it was never a game, that I'd trade every dollar I have just to hold your hand again." Silence stretched for a moment too long. Then she stepped down the stairs, her bare arm brushing the rain as she moved closer. "You humiliated me," she whispered, eyes wide and shimmering. "You left me to face that cruelty alone." "I know," he said, swallowing hard, "and I'll regret it every day I live. You broke something in me, Liam. I'll spend my life helping you heal it." Thunder rolled in the distance. He held out the bouquet, fingers trembling. "Please." She stared at it, then at him. "You stood there in front of everyone," she murmured. "No mask, no press, just you." He nodded. "And you said the words I needed when no one expected you to." Another beat of silence. Then, slowly, so slowly, she took the flowers from his hand. The crowd inside gasped. Some clapped. One elderly woman wiped her eyes with a tissue. Liam looked stunned. "I'm not saying it's okay yet," Aaliyah said, voice low but steady. "But I see the man you're trying to be. And I think part of me still loves him." A breath escaped his lips like a prayer answered. She stepped into his arms, hesitant but real. And there, in the pouring rain, in front of an audience that didn't matter, Liam pulled Aaliyah close, held her like she was air and fire, and everything he'd ever needed. For the first time, he didn't feel powerful. He felt whole. The decision to meet Liam again didn't come easily for Aaliyah. Her heart was still tender, cracked along invisible lines. But something about his apology had shaken her, cut past the anger and into the soft ache that never stopped missing him. So when his text came 2 days later, "Can I see you? Just once. No pressure, no promises, just honesty." She didn't say yes. She simply replied, "Where?" The following afternoon, Liam picked her up in a modest silver sedan. Not a flashy sports car, not a limousine, just something simple. That gesture alone told her he was listening. They drove mostly in silence, the tension heavy, but not hostile. The air between them was fragile, like a house of glass. One wrong move, and it would all come crashing down. She glanced at him briefly. His golden brown hair was brushed back neatly. His blue eyes were focused on the road, yet distant, like he was holding in more than he knew how to express. When they pulled up to the edge of Hillcrest Estate, not the main mansion, but a secluded section surrounded by stone walls and tall hedges, Aaliyah was confused. "This isn't the house," she murmured. He looked at her and gave a small, almost nervous smile. "Number, it's something more important." He led her down a cobblestone path, through a wrought iron gate covered in ivy. As the gate creaked open, Aaliyah gasped softly. It was a garden. But not just any garden. A breathtaking blend of roses, lilies, jasmine, and hydrangeas, vibrant, fragrant, alive. The air buzzed softly with the hum of bees and the flutter of butterflies. The garden radiated peace. "This was my mother's," Liam said quietly, stepping beside her. "She used to tend it herself before she got sick." Aaliyah's eyes widened. "It's beautiful." "It wasn't," he said with a bittersweet laugh. "Not for years. After she passed, I let it die. Like everything soft in my life." She turned to him. Breath caught. He swallowed hard, then continued. "When you left, I kept walking by this place, and I remembered something my mum used to say when I was little." He looked at her then, eyes filled with something deep and aching. She said, "Real love is like a garden. It only grows when you water it with kindness, and it dies when you ignore it." Aaliyah's lips trembled. She didn't know what to say. "I brought this place back for her, but I dedicated it to you." He led her to a stone bench near the heart of the garden. Carved into the wood behind it was a plaque, "To Aaliyah," for reminding a cold heart how to bloom again. Tears flooded her eyes before she could stop them. "You did this for me." "I needed you to know," he said, voice cracking, "that I don't just love you. I respect you. I see you. And I want to create something real, not just with words or gifts, but with actions, with time, with truth." The wind stirred softly around them. They sat together in silence for a while, surrounded by beauty, by second chances, by ghosts turned gentle. Aaliyah closed her eyes, letting the scent of jasmine fill her lungs. She remembered the first time she'd stepped into Hillcrest Mansion, afraid and invisible. Now she felt chosen. She turned to him slowly. "Why me, Liam?" He met her gaze. "Because you're the only person who ever looked at me and didn't see money or power. You saw a man, a broken one. And still, you cared." He reached out but didn't touch her. "Not yet. I ruined things once. But if you give me a second chance, I'll never stop proving I was worth that grace." The ache in her chest turned soft, warm. He still made her feel seen. He still made her feel. Slowly, she placed her hand in his, their fingers intertwined like roots pressing into fertile soil. They leaned in, hesitant, cautious. Their foreheads touched first, a whisper of forgiveness between them. Then, finally, their lips met. It wasn't wild or rushed. It wasn't lustful or desperate. It was slow, healing. A kiss soaked in years of silence, months of longing, and a promise of more. And in that moment, the ice around Aaliyah's heart began to thaw. Not completely, but enough to believe again, enough to hope, enough to love. The silence between them was cracking. The truth had found its way out. Now, only love had to speak. Liam Kensington had conquered boardrooms, negotiated billion-dollar deals, and silenced global competition with nothing but his voice. But nothing prepared him for the vulnerability of searching for one woman who didn't want to be found. Aaliyah Brown. She had once walked through the halls of his mansion with quiet grace and humble strength. Now she moved like a ghost in the world, present but untouchable. And he was a man chasing shadows, chasing her. Because now that he knew the truth, he couldn't live without making it right. His search began with the only lead he had, her old address in the South Side neighborhood. It was a narrow street, filled with rusted gates, peeling paint, and signs of resilience. A world so far from the cold marble of Hillcrest Mansion, yet filled with more warmth than he had ever known. He wore no suit this time, just jeans, a worn sweater, and in his hand, a bouquet of wildflowers he'd remembered her admiring from the garden once. He knocked on the faded blue door and waited. The woman who opened it was old, with silver hair in a tight bun and sharp eyes dulled only slightly by time. He knew her instantly. "Mrs. Brown?" he asked. She squinted at him, confused. Then recognition dawned like a storm. "You're him," she said, voice low. "The rich boy who broke my granddaughter's heart." Liam bowed his head. "Yes, Mum, I deserve that. I'm here to make things right." She didn't slam the door, though she could have. Instead, she stepped aside slowly and said, "You have 5 minutes. Sit." Inside, the living room smelled of eucalyptus and lavender. Family photos lined the dusty mantel, pictures of Aaliyah as a child, grinning wide, braided hair flying in the wind. Liam sat stiffly on the couch, hands clenched. Her grandmother studied him like he was a book with torn pages. "You came all the way here," she finally said. He nodded. "I love her. And I was a fool." Fools don't fix themselves. They just regret. "I am fixing myself," he said firmly. "I've started therapy. I've cleaned house. I exposed the lies. But none of it means anything without her." The woman's eyes softened slightly. "She's scared," she murmured. "That girl gave you her heart, and you let it shatter." "I know. Do you know what it took for her to even look at a man like you? Do you know how long it took to convince her she was worthy of being seen?" Liam swallowed the lump in his throat. "Please, just tell me where she is." The old woman shook her head. "I won't betray her trust, but if she wants to be found, she'll let you know." So Liam waited. Every day he left something small at the doorstep. A new letter, handwritten, a book she once mentioned loving, a cup of sweet iced tea with a note that read, "Still remember how you take it." He walked the neighborhood, helping elderly residents carry groceries, reading to kids at the library, building not just a path to Aaliyah, but a reflection of the man she'd helped awaken in him. People started to talk. The neighborhood buzzed. "Isn't that the rich CEO? He's been looking for that brown girl for weeks. Maybe he's serious." But Aaliyah, she saw it all, from afar. She knew the minute he spoke to her grandmother. She saw the letters, smelled the flowers. She watched from a second-floor window in a friend's apartment across town, where she'd been staying quietly. Her heart ached with every gesture. But still, she didn't reach out, because she was terrified. Terrified that if she let him back in, he would break her again. Terrified that her love would never be enough for a man raised in coldness and power. She wanted to believe him, wanted to run to him, throw her arms around him, and cry into his chest. But she couldn't. Not yet. One evening, she visited her grandmother. Hidden behind the curtains, she watched Liam walking away after another failed attempt. The bouquet he left behind had a small note attached. "Still searching. Still hoping. Still yours, if you'll have me. Tears blurred her vision. She picked up the bouquet, pressed the note to her chest, and whispered, "Why do you have to be so damn sincere now?" Liam was losing hope. He sat in his car across from the house, engine off, rain tapping on the windshield like a soft metronome of heartbreak. His hands trembled as he held the steering wheel. For the first time in years, he felt utterly powerless. Until the passenger door opened, and Aaliyah slid in beside him. She didn't speak. Neither did he. The silence between them was thick with everything unsaid. Her eyes were tired but strong. Her hands clutched his note. Liam turned slowly to face her. "Aaliyah." She shook her head gently. "Don't talk yet." She pulled something from her bag, a letter of her own. "I read every one of yours," she said quietly. "This is mine." She handed it to him, then opened the door again. "I'm not ready to come back," she said, stepping into the rain. "But I'm not hiding any more either." And just like that, she was gone again. But this time, he had hope. Because she let him find her. The sun dipped low behind Hillcrest Mansion, casting golden light across the marble steps and ivy-covered walls. The same mansion where Aaliyah once tiptoed through hallways with a feather duster now felt entirely different. It no longer loomed. It welcomed. Liam stood on the front terrace, nervously pacing, dressed in a simple white button-up and soft grey trousers. No designer brands, no boardroom armour, just a man about to bare his soul. Again. Inside the mansion, the staff had been given the day off. The chandeliers were dimmed. The grand piano stood silent. And yet, the house felt alive. Because she was coming back. Not to work, not to sweep, not to hide, but to be seen. Fully. He checked the small velvet box in his pocket again, even though he'd already done it a dozen times. His fingers trembled around it like it was made of glass. "She'll come," he whispered to himself. "She has to come." At 6:03 p.m., the sound of cautious heels echoed through the stone archway. Liam turned. And there she was. Aaliyah stepped through the gates in a soft beige dress that clung gently to her figure, her thick braids gathered in a low bun. Her brown skin glowed in the amber light, and her eyes, they held curiosity, warmth, and the ghost of yesterday's pain. He didn't move. He didn't rush. He just stared, memorizing the moment. "You invited me," she said softly. "I came." He smiled. "I know. And thank you for trusting me with even this." She walked closer. "What is this, Liam? Why am I here?" His throat tightened. He turned and silently led her through the doors, not to the grand foyer, but to the smaller back garden. The same one where they'd shared their first kiss under the moonlight. It was lit with strings of soft white lights. A table was set with 2 plates, though neither of them would eat. A small speaker in the corner played faint classical music, his mother's favourite. And in the centre stood a single pedestal. On it a framed photo of his mother, smiling. Aaliyah froze. "I didn't get to introduce you properly," Liam said, stepping beside her. "But she would have loved you. Fiercely." Her hand fluttered to her chest. He faced her now, his expression stripped bare. "No more rehearsals. No grand stage. Just this." He slowly reached into his pocket. Her breath hitched. With a shaky breath, Liam dropped to one knee. Aaliyah gasped, covering her mouth with trembling fingers. He opened the velvet box. Inside was a single, modest diamond ring in a gold band. No glamour, no show, just sincerity. "I spent my whole life thinking love was weakness," he began, voice cracking. That power and control were the only things that could protect me. He looked up at her, eyes burning. Then I met a maid, with gentle eyes and a spine of steel. A woman who loved with depth, who gave without asking for anything in return. A woman who didn't just clean my home, she cleaned the dust off my heart. Her eyes flooded. I don't want a queen to pose beside me. I want a partner to walk through storms with. Someone who reminds me who I am when I forget. Someone who will build a future with me. Not just out of wealth, but out of truth. He held the ring up. I want to build that life with you, Aaliyah Brown. He exhaled, barely able to breathe. Not as my maid. Not as my secret. Not even as the woman I fell in love with in silence. But as my wife. The world slowed. Birds seemed to hush. Even the wind stilled to listen. Tears streaked her cheeks. She covered her heart with one hand, overwhelmed, glowing, radiant. You really mean this? She whispered. This isn't out of guilt or regret. He shook his head. It's out of love, out of truth, out of knowing I'm not whole without you. Silence. Then, yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, Liam. Yes. He slid the ring on her finger, hands trembling, and then they rose into each other's arms, the kiss they shared soft and sacred, a sealing of souls rather than a spark of lust. It wasn't a fairy tale anymore. It was something better, something real. Their story was no longer about what separated them. It was about what had brought them together and how they'd chosen to stay. The day had finally come. The sky above Hillcrest Estate was a perfect watercolor blend of lavender and gold, the sun casting its final light on the world before bowing to the stars. But inside the estate's blooming garden, where Liam once fell in love with a quiet maid named Aaliyah Brown, magic unfolded. It had been months since the proposal, months of healing, learning, planning, and loving without fear. No tabloids, no secrets, no shadows, only light. Aaliyah stood before a tall mirror in the bridal room, dressed in a gown that shimmered like moonlight on calm water. It was not flashy, but elegant, soft satin that draped over her curves and flowed like a river with every breath. Her braids, still thick, still bold, had been artfully arranged into a crown atop her head, intertwined with tiny pearls and gold thread. It wasn't just hair. It was her history woven into glory. She looked every bit like the queen she'd always been. Only now, the world was finally watching. Behind her stood her grandmother, now healthy and radiant in a lilac dress. Tears glistened in the elder woman's eyes. "My baby," she whispered, voice trembling. "You made it." Aaliyah turned, took her hands, and kissed them gently. "You're the reason I did." Outside, Liam stood at the altar beneath a floral arch of white roses and deep violets, her favorite colors. He wore a custom-tailored cream suit with no tie, just a gold pin of his mother's rose emblem at his chest. His medium-long, golden-brown hair framed his face softly, but his blue eyes, usually guarded and cool, were glassy with emotion. He kept glancing toward the garden path, trying to breathe steadily. "She's coming," his best man whispered. Liam nodded. "I just can't believe I get to keep her." The music shifted, and the crowd turned. And then she appeared. Aaliyah stepped onto the stone path, every guest rising to their feet in awe. Her steps were slow but sure, each one a reminder of how far she'd come, from scrubbing marble floors to standing at the center of her own fairy tale. As she approached, Liam's lips parted in awe. His heart hammered, his soul wept, because he saw her, not the girl who once dusted his furniture, but the woman who rebuilt his heart from rubble. The woman who'd turned pain into power. The woman who wore love like royalty. Aaliyah's eyes locked with his, and the rest of the world faded. Only him. Only her. Only everything they survived to get here. The ceremony began with no pomp, no long speeches, just vows written from the heart. "I once thought love was for the weak," Liam said, voice thick with emotion. "But then you came. Brave, beautiful, unapologetically you. You taught me strength lives in softness, that home is not built with walls, but with you beside me." Aaliyah smiled through tears. "I never imagined this life," she whispered in return. "But somehow, I found you in the storm. I didn't just fall in love with you. I chose you, and I'll keep choosing you. Every day we breathe." A hush fell over the guests as the officiant smiled. "With the power of love, honesty, and grace, by the commitment you've both made, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Liam didn't wait. He pulled her into his arms, pressing a kiss to her lips that drew cheers, whistles, and more than a few tears. It was a kiss of triumph, a kiss of healing, a kiss that crowned her queen in his life forever. The reception was intimate, candle-lit, and warm. The guest list was short. Her grandmother, a few old neighbors from Aaliyah's street, the shelter staff who'd comforted her, and the loyal workers of Hillcrest who'd witnessed the story unfold. Liam danced with her, barefoot on the grass under fairy lights, whispering sweet things only she could hear. Aaliyah laughed, a deep, real laugh that shook her shoulders and rested her head on his chest. They didn't need a castle or a crowd. They had truth. They had each other. Later that night, Liam carried her over the mansion's threshold, this time not as a maid with a key, but as the mistress of the home, his wife, his equal. He kissed her hand as they entered the master suite. "This house," he said softly, "is finally a home." She touched his face. "Because love lives here now." They undressed slowly, not in haste, but in reverence. What once began with stolen glances and unsaid dreams now found completion in shared breaths and sacred touch. Their wedding night was not just passion. It was promise. And when the morning came, the sun poured into Hillcrest through open windows. In the garden below, roses bloomed, and in the bed above, Aaliyah woke in her husband's arms, her braids untied, her heart at peace, her ring gleaming in the light. From maid to love to queen.